week, we looked at 1 Corinthians 10, 14 through 17. Didn't go as far as I wanted to. I wanted to get through to verse 22, but we only got to verse 17. And we were looking at the Lord's Supper, and we were saying that as we partake of the Lord's Supper rightly, that's key, rightly, that as we partake of the Lord's Supper rightly, it is to have communion with Christ. We are partaking of, having communion with the body and the blood of Christ, as well as with one another. We saw that taking it rightly, due to the communion we have, brings about special blessings from God. It's a divine meal. That's what we saw. So last week I was telling you, I had 2 points, right? We had the divine meal, and I never got to the second point with the demonic meal, but today we're going to get into that demonic meal. We're going to get into the demonic meal, and then we're going to get into the disinterested, or maybe even what we would call detached meal. We're going to be talking about that as well. But it's the divine meal first off, and I like what John Piper says. John Piper said this. He says, when believers eat the bread and drink the cup physically, we do another kind of eating and drinking spiritually. We eat and drink, that is, we take into our lives what happened on the cross. By faith, by trusting in all that God is for us in Jesus, we nourish ourselves with the benefits that Jesus obtained for us when he bled and died on the cross. It is a partaking, it is a communion with Christ as well as with others. But it is not the only meal that the Israelites, and therefore the 1 Corinthians, actually partook of. Now, probably, I'm guessing, none of us have gone this far and partaking of this kind of meal. But the Israelites did it and the Corinthians did, and so we need to be very careful about it. It is the demonic meal. So as we go deeper this morning, we'll also see that there's, like I said, the disinterested meal, the detached meal, whatever you want to call it, as well. We're finishing up chapter 10, going into chapter 11, verse 1. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and read this together. If you will, please stand for the honor of the reading of God's Word. We start at verse 18. Chapter 11, verse 1. Consider the people of Israel, are not those who eat the sacrifices participants in the altar? What do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Eat whatever is sold in the market, in the meat market, without raising the question on the ground of conscience. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. If one of the unbelievers invites you to dinner, and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. But if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat of it, for the sake of the one who informed you and for the sake of conscience. I do not mean your conscience, but his. For why should my liberty be determined by someone else's conscience? And if I partake with thanksgiving, why am I denounced? Because of that for which I give thanks? So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Give no offense to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God. Just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, that they may be saved. Be imitators of me, as I am Christ. So if you remember last week, we were talking about this cycle that Israel was taking, and so there was this cycle that they would do it, and they would come and they would observe the Lord and celebrate and eat, and they had no problem of eating the manna and drinking the water that came from the rock and that kind of thing. But then just a little bit later, they would be complaining that the manna was just we're tired of the manna, we want something else, and we don't, and we'd rather just have something. We should have gone back to Egypt where there was all this other type of food and all these other tasty splendors that we could have had. But no, we have this manna, and they would just go back and forth. And God would seem to always be providing for them, even in their complaints. Now, there was judgment within there as well. But his covenant mercy upon Israel is something that we should recognize. That he gave to them the food, he gave to them the drink, and it was a spiritual food, and it was a spiritual drink. And we see that throughout this portion of the letter, Paul was holding up the Israelites as an example to the Corinthians. He was putting them together to show them that this is what the Israelites do, and you as Corinthians, you as believers, ought not be like the Israelites over here who are constantly complaining and constantly turning into idolatry and sexual immorality. So we see that Paul writes this here. He goes right to it. He goes right to the heart. Right? Verse 18. Consider the people of Israel are not those who eat the sacrifice, participants in the altar. In the earlier parts of chapter 10, Paul mentioned that the Israelites, like I said, received the spiritual food. They received the spiritual drink from God. In chapter 16 and 17, we see this. So it was like almost immediately after they cross of the Red Sea and they get onto the other side and they start complaining. And so then God gives them that manna in chapter 16. And then in chapter 17 of Exodus, we see that God gives them the drink from the rock. By chapter 32, which really is not, it seems like maybe that's a 16-whole chapter, not that long after chapter 16 and 17, just a few days, a few weeks, we see them already participating in idolatry, making a graven image, making the golden calf. And we saw last week that Paul quotes from chapter 32, Exodus chapter 32, when he says that they sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. Not good. That they would accept both the food from God and the drink from God and then have a meal given to an idol. So Paul tells the Corinthians to consider what they did. By eating of the sacrifice, didn't they participate in the altar of that idol? And the answer is really understood yes. We don't see that in there, right? But it's the understood yes. Yes, of course they did. Absolutely. Why would they not? Now, today in the 21st century, we kind of have a hard time because we don't go to the altar. We don't make sacrifices to the altar. And so we kind of sort of have this, we can kind of maybe get it, but it's a little bit more difficult because we're so far removed from that kind of thinking. So I was trying to think about this and how is it that we could maybe understand it a little bit better. And so my mind, somehow, for some reason, maybe like by God's providence, I have no idea, thought of It's a Wonderful Life. Raise your hand if you've ever seen It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, most of us have seen It's Wonderful. Okay. So George Bailey, Mr. Potter, right? There's a moment where George Bailey has lost the $8,000, right? You guys remember this? That they don't have it anymore. Technically, it was a song playing, but George Bailey's taking the rap for it, and he's looking for it, and he can't find it, and it really is that Mr. Potter took the money. He wouldn't give it back. And so he goes to Mr. Potter. Do you guys remember this scene? He goes to Mr. Potter, and he stands there, and he asks Mr. Potter for a loan. He just needs $8,000 because he's misplaced it. So Mr. Potter, what does he do? He gives him a cigar, and he lights it and tells him, have a seat, George, right? And so George takes the cigar, he starts puffing on the cigar, he has a seat there, and of course, you get the imagery that Mr. Potter is way up here, right? And then George is way down in this low seat. And so there he is, and he's asking Mr. Potter for money. He needs something from him. So then he receives the cigar from him. And they talk about it. Mr. Potter's going to give him a job. He's going to give him a good job, a very high-paying job for those times. And George Bailey can't really even believe what it is that he is hearing from Mr. Potter. It seems so good, so generous. And so he asks, he says, well, can I go home and can I talk to Mary about it? And so Mr. Potter says, oh, sure, take all the time you want. You just let me know on Monday or whatever, right? And so George Bailey gets up, he stands up, and then what's the next thing he does? Does anybody know? He shakes Mr. Potter's hand. And it's at that moment that he shakes Mr. Potter's hand that he realizes what he has just done. He's basically, for all intents and purposes, made a deal with him. And he brings his hand back in disgust. He says, no, I don't need to think about it. I don't need to talk to anybody about it. No, not going to happen, right? That's what he says to him. Because he realized at that moment that he had started to participate in the very evil that was Mr. Potter. And he could not even believe it. He had already received the cigar. He goes in wanting something. He's going in wanting $8,000, and so he is almost willing, it seems like, to participate in this transaction. And he does initially by taking up the cigar, and then he starts to think, maybe this will happen for me. And then he shakes the hand, and that's when he realizes he has participated in evil. This is what they did back then. This is what the Corinthians did. So maybe they wanted something. Maybe their garden wasn't growing very well, right? Maybe they got too much rain and they just needed a little, they were like Missouri, right? And they just needed a little bit less rain, okay? Or something like that. Maybe they wanted to have children, and so they would go and they would make sacrifices to the idols, to the gods that they believed in. And then once they did that, by participating, it's like that kind of a handshake there, by participating in eating up the meal, they're basically saying, I believe that idol is going to, or that God is going to go ahead and give me what I want. But I have to partake in this handshake. I have to partake in this sacrifice in order to receive what I want. That's how it was. But we don't generally do that, right? Not like that. We may kind of do that. We may kind of treat God even like that at times. We need something from God. Things are not going well in our lives. Marital troubles, job troubles, something like that. So we're like, well, let's just throw God a bone and just attend church for about 2-3 weeks until things get back together, and then we'll receive from God, and we fellowship with Him, and He's fellowship with us. That's what they would do to the idols. And so that's why Paul asked, were they not participating? It was like they were shaking hands with the idols. By eating of that meal, they were fellowshipping with the idol. With not just really the idol, but ultimately he brings up that it's not with idols, but so much that it is with demons. Let's look real quick, because remember last week, he asked the question. He's like, or he said, he made the statement, he was getting a little snarky, right, with the Corinthians, getting a little bit sarcastic, and he says, hey, you're the wise ones, you guys figure out what I'm saying, you guys figure out what I mean. Now he's actually telling them, because they probably don't really get what he is saying here. They're misunderstanding. So he wants them to understand. Verse 19. What do I imply then? What do I mean? Same word there, right? That food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? And of course the answer is no. Is that cigar anything? No. But what does it represent? It represents community. It represents partnership with them. Is this meat really anything at all? No. But what it does is it shows that you are participating, you are having communion, you are fellowshipping with these idols. But is it really an idol? Really anything? Is an idol really anything? Well, no, not really. It's just a piece of wood. It's just a piece of metal. In and of itself, it's really nothing, right? I love Isaiah, because Isaiah talks about, going out and chopping down a tree and using part of that, and he's like, you choose a half, and you're like, okay, that's going to be my idol. I'm going to make an idol out of that one. But this one, I'm just going to burn it. Same tree, same wood. It's like, what makes the difference? There is no difference. That was his point. That you worship things, use half of it for firewood to cook your meals. The other half you're just going to carve into an idol as if it's anything. It's nothing. An idol is absolutely nothing, but it is what is behind it, is what is brought up. What does that symbolize? The demons behind it. So look with me, go back to verse 15 real quick. Or no, I'm sorry. Look at verse 20. I don't know why I said 15. Let's go to verse 20. It says, no, I imply, or I mean, I say, that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. For this verse, Paul actually is taking them back to Deuteronomy. So in Deuteronomy chapter 32, we see something called the Song of Moses. And in Deuteronomy, we're going to be paying attention, right? We're going to deal with this probably in about a year and a half when we get there, okay? So remember this, right? In Deuteronomy chapter 32 is the Song of Moses. He's recounting things that had happened, right? And so as he is recounting things that had happened to Israel in their wilderness journey, about to go into the promised land, he brings up these ideas of when they started to offer sacrifices to idols. But then he makes a distinction. He says, like, really, it wasn't to idols at all. It was to demons. Go with me. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 16 and 17. They stirred him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations, they provoked him to anger. They sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods they had never known, to new gods that had come recently from whom your fathers had never dreaded. So the idols weren't really anything, but what was behind those idols, what the meaning of those idols were the demons. The food really wasn't anything except for what the meaning behind it was. And what was behind the meaning of the food and what was behind the meaning of the idols was everything. It meant everything. It is idolatry, not because it's a piece of wood and not because it's a piece of metal, but because there is demonic activity behind it. It doesn't matter what it's made of. The demonic forces behind them were real. And therefore, to go and offer a sacrifice to them and to eat a meal of them was to commune with the demonic. It was to have fellowship with the demonic. It was to seek the benefits, the blessings from the demonic as they were sharing this meal, right? Just like George Bailey, taking that cigar, giving the handshake, hoping to receive something and then realizing what he said. And Paul wrote emphatically that to the Corinthians, I don't want you to participate with the demonic. I want you to participate with Christ. That's his point. Don't be taking of the table of the demonic. Partake of the table of Christ. That's where your blessing lies. To eat the meal at the altar or to eat the meat that was knowingly sacrificed to the idol was to align oneself with the demon, which a believer never ought to do. Must never do. It was a demonic meal. And Paul wrote, let's go back to 1 Corinthians. Paul wrote in 10:21, he says, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. It's just an impossibility. You can't serve two gods. You can't serve God and demons. You can't serve God and money, right? You can't serve two gods. You can have one God, you can have Christ, or you can go with the demonic, but you can't do both. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be on the side of Mr. Potter and on the side of George Bailey, on the side of the citizens of Bedford Falls. Right? You can't wear your Bruins jersey and your Blues jersey. You can't do it. You can be on one side or the other, right? Or maybe they did horrible last night, so let's go with the Cards and the Cubs, right? You can't wear a Cards Cubs jersey. They did much better. Okay? You can't do that. It's an impossibility. You can't sit on the fence. You can't be friends with the world and friends with God. To be friends with the world is to be at enmity, as James says, with God. You cannot be friends with demons and friends with Christ. So you cannot participate and receive the blessing of the Lord's Supper and participate and receive the blessings of the demonic meat. So basically what this is this is Paul having his Joshua moment, saying, choose you today whom you will serve. Because you can't serve them. And so he asks him, shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? If we go back, you saw that in verse 16, right? He asked that same question. Or saying that they have provoked the Lord to jealousy. God loves his people. He loves them dearly. He does not want them to have any type of participation with any other god, specifically demonic, right? And he asked the question, are we stronger than he? Going back, right? So last week it was the whole profound, right? You're the wise ones, you figure out what I'm talking about, right? And now he's going to the powerful. Are we really stronger than he? Are we? Not. Anybody that thinks that we are is a plain out idiot. That's the Chris Hughes version. Okay. That's the idea. We're not stronger than he is. And if we continue on in this path of trying to sit on the fence, God's jealousy is provoked. That's why we see, as Matt brought up this morning in chapter 11, where he says that if we partake of this meal in an unworthy manner, we are eating and drinking judgment to ourselves. We need to be really careful. This is a holy meal, and we need to participate in it as if it was holy. This isn't saying that you have to be perfect. That's not what Paul means. We're going to get to that in September when we get back to 1 Corinthians. It's not saying that we have to be perfect. It's saying we need to understand the meal and partake of it correctly. The Corinthians were not taking the Lord's Supper, or were not taking the Lord's Supper seriously, and they were not taking their idolatry seriously. Paul was telling them both were serious business. In one sense, for the same reason, and then in a different sense, for an entirely different reason. So they're the same because they're participation. When you take the Lord's Supper, you're participating, you're having communion with Christ and with each other. You're having a special grace that God has given to us. And so in the same way that if you are partaking of a demonic meal, then you are participating, you are communing with those demonic beings. So in that sense, it's the same. So if you're participating in one meal, you're participating with them. And if you're participating in this meal, you're participating with Christ. In that sense, they're kind of the same. That they're opposites, because obviously one is the table of the Lord with true spiritual blessings from God, and the other is the table of demons. There is no blessing, there is no benefit in idolatry. But there's a third table we're going to be looking at. And so there's the divine meal, there's the demonic meal, and then there is the disinterested, the detached meal that we see. Let's look at verses 23 to 27 real quick. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising any question on the ground of conscience. For the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. If one of the unbelievers invites you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any questions on the ground of conscience. So quickly I want to point out three things about this text. Paul, first off, goes back to that whole all things are lawful, right? We all caught that. He says it twice. It's a saying that the Corinthians had. It was a saying that they boasted about. All things are lawful. And now he's going back and he's saying, hey, remember that? Remember that whole idea that about all things being lawful? I'm going to say it one more time, that not everything is beneficial. Not everything builds up. It's not going to help you, and it's not going to strengthen. That's what build up really means. It's not going to strengthen you or anybody else. And his point here is really more about anybody else. It's not going to help you, and it's not going to benefit anybody else. It's not going to strengthen anybody else. That's what his point is. The Christian life is not about asserting rights, but it's about strengthening our brothers and sisters. And Paul told them, second thing, that was the first thing. Paul told them to go to the market and don't ask any questions. Almost like a plausible deniability, right? Don't ask, don't tell. So this is where I get the word disinterested from, right? Detached. We don't want to know. Don't ask if it's been sacrificed to an idol. After all, the food in and of itself is nothing, right? It's what you knowingly do with it. This is why also I cannot believe in transubstantiation or consubstantiation. The food is nothing. If the bread and wine became the body and blood of Christ, we would have to do it as the Church of Rome does and treasure it and its elements. We have to be very careful with it. We have to protect it from defilement. But Paul stated that food is nothing. The elements are actually nothing in and of themselves. It's also why I have no problem with, unbelieving kids after services going ahead and partaking of the bread and the drink, and just eating it because it tastes good, which Denny does a fantastic job of making our bread. And I don't have a problem with it because the food in and of itself is nothing. It is the communion at the This entire plan and all of its belongings belong to God. And He has given it to us to enjoy. There's no longer any restrictions on what we can and cannot eat, right? All foods are ours to eat. And so, let's eat of it with a thankful heart. But, the thing about it is the meal becomes an interested meal, an detached meal, when we know where that meat came from. If someone brings up that they have sacrificed, it becomes an attached meal. Look at verse 28 and 29 real quick. But if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it, for the sake of the one who informed you, and for the sake of conscience. I do not mean your conscience, but his. So let's pretend for a second that a couple friend has invited you over for dinner. They're not believers, and you are. You're living in the first century, by the way. I don't think this would happen today in the 21st century. Okay? So they're not believers, but you are. They invite you over to dinner, and you gladly go over to dinner, and you see that you're having prime rib, and you cannot wait to sink your teeth into this nice, succulent prime rib. And so they're cutting it, and they're cutting you off a big, huge piece of it, and you're about to chow in, and they're like, hey, I just want to let you know that me and Mary, we're trying to get pregnant. And you're like, whoa, congratulations, that's awesome. Can't wait for you guys to be able to start your own family. He's like, yeah. And so one of the things that we did was we took this to Aphrodite, and we sacrificed it to her, and now we're going to participate in the meal, and hopefully, maybe very soon, we'll get pregnant. And that's when you have to, even though it's prime rib, punch your fork down and say, I appreciate it, but I cannot eat this meal. Or you may have a friend sitting next to you, another believer sitting next to you. And as it's being served, he leans over and says, hey, I saw them buy this from the market, from Aphrodite's market earlier today. Just thought you might want to know. Then we can't eat it. It has now become an interested meal. It has now become an engaged, an attached meal. And Paul says, you can't eat it. Not because of your conscience. You may understand, you may think that, well, food is food and it doesn't necessarily matter, which is true. But what about your friend? What about your brother in Christ there? What about their consciences? What about the unbelieving world's consciences? You need to be thinking more about their conscience and their souls and less about your stomach. Having been informed, one no longer can eat of the food because of the conscience of those who have told you. It's not that you're not thankful for the food. It's not that you're seeking to offend the hosts. It's that you are trying to strengthen, build up. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. You are trying to strengthen, build up the conscience of the informant. And your desire is not to live in your rights, but to lead the pagan to Christ. It is not to live in your rights, but to strengthen the conscience of a weaker brother or sister. And what better way to lead a pagan to Christ than to explain in all the love and care that you can that while you appreciate their being a host, and while you appreciate them making such a wonderful meal, you cannot participate in it because it would be participating in something that goes against Christ. And that Christ means more to you, more than you, than this meal or even if they are so offended, they break the friendship off. Your desire is not to live in what is lawful, but in what builds up, what strengthens. Paul asks two questions. He says in verse 29, verse 29, didn't get to this part yet. For why should my liberty be determined by someone else's conscience? If I partake with thanksgiving, why am I denounced because of that which I give thanks? And it almost seems like Paul is like reversing course here. Seems like he's kind of got annoyed with these weaker Christians, this conscience talk. But in reality, all he is doing is he is summarizing in question form everything that he has brought to light since really chapter 6. And dealing with the conscience. Why? I've already explained to you why. Look throughout the letter. You'll see it there. Because we care more about their consciences. We care more about their soul. We make sure that they are being built up. These questions are rhetorical questions, but it's supposed to send them back into the letter to find the answer because he has dealt with it now, what we would say, for 4 chapters. We know the answers if we've been paying attention to what he's been writing. We are not on our own. Christ did not come just to save the individual. He came to save the body. He came to save the church. And we are not in this alone. We are in this together. And so therefore we are to think carefully about one another. Right? That's what Paul tells the Philippians, doesn't he? To consider each other as more important and their needs as more important than your own. It's not about our rights. It's about everybody else. It's about building them up. It's about strengthening them. And Paul says, I care more for the conscience of my brothers and sisters than getting what rightfully comes to me. And why am I denounced because of that which I give thanks? Because I'm disregarding the conscience of my brothers and sisters. That's why. Why are people denouncing me? Because I'm not thinking of other people as more important than myself. And so then he says in verse 31, so whether you eat or drink, that's right, I'm like, how do you glorify God just eating and drinking? In context, it really doesn't make sense. So whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do all for the glory of God. How do we do that? 2 ways. 1, be thankful for what he's given to you. Number 2, consider those around you and seek to build their consciences up. And this goes for everything, right? Whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, right? So maybe nobody has a problem with eating something anymore. Again, we're kind of far removed. But it doesn't matter. Whatever you do. So this goes for everything. Be thankful for what God has given to you, and consider those who are around you and seek to build up their consciences. Not just limited to the meal. So if you have no problem listening to secular music, okay. But if you know that somebody is obviously coming to your house and they do have a problem, and this would bind their conscience, would actually hurt them to be able to listen to secular music, then what do? Then don't listen to secular music. And if you really want to go as far as Paul would, you're like, oh, then I will never eat meat ever again in this age if that's the way it takes, if that's what it takes, right? You want to go that far? You can go that far. Turn off the music. If you have no issues drinking a glass of wine, but others think there is an issue with it, there are teetotalers that think that it would be a sin to do so, and what do? You put it away. These are matters of conscience, right? Not a matter of explicit sin. If it is obviously an explicit sin, then you obviously abstain from it forever. Not just when others are around. This is why Paul says, he says this, let's go back. Verse 32, we're going to read to the end. 32 to verse 11, chapter 11, verse 1. Give no offense to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, that they may be saved. Be imitators of me, as I am of Christ. And so we consider both the lost and the saved in our actions, in our words. We need to consider consider them both. We consider those outside of Christ and those within the body. Why? Because it's about the gospel. Everything comes down to the salvation of the soul through the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is either a lost person, a person who does not know Jesus yet, either their justification that makes them right with God, or the saved person who does know Christ and does trust in Christ, their sanctification. We need to consider both. We need to consider justification of the lost and sanctification of the saved. That's what Paul was about. When he says to them, be imitators of me as I am of Christ, he's saying, this is what I'm about. I'm about the gospel. And therefore, you need to be imitators of me. Go with me real quick if you want to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. I'm just going to read it to you if you want. Verse 22, he says, I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. That's what he's reiterating at the end of chapter 10. This is who I am. And therefore, this is what you need to be as well. I consider everyone I'm around for the sake of the gospel. So therefore, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Because why did Christ even come? What did Jesus say? I came to what? Seek and to save. That's what we're about. That's what we ought to be about. Now, how do we do that? Various ways. We have family. We talk about Christ often, the gospel often in family. If we have jobs, we try to talk about God, about Christ, Jesus, often. Our places of employment. If we have neighbors, stick our head over the fence like Wilson from Home Improvement. Just introduced Glenn into Home Improvement the other day. Right? We talk to them. We talk about Christ. Does it have to be every single conversation that we have? No. It does need to be in our conversations. It needs to be something regular in our conversations. We need to consider it so that we can build each other